Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Today my guest is Mary Lacksen. Now, Mary is in Sparta, Georgia, and she has a business called BeeCo Apiaries. For those of you out there who are wanting to start a sideline business with someone in your family, a little business with the bees, then this is the episode for you because Mary works together with her daughter and they sell honey, nucs, and also do small-scale queen rearing. So Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Oh, that's great. Now, would you like to start us off today, Mary, with a funny beekeeping story?
Oh, I have many, I think. Having done this now for about 14 years, it seems like every day something funny happens. But I think back in the beginning when people called me a bee haver and not a beekeeper, it was that experience going out into the beehive and thinking, oh, I'm just going to feed them real quickly. And went out there, and you're always nervous in the beginning. And so I go out there with the sugar syrup and changing out the jars and literally forgot to put my veil on. Needless to say, I was covered in bees, and my yard is about 200 yards from my house, and I'm running back across the field, just covered like I've got a swarm all over my back. And my husband and dogs fortunately rescued me, and the bees went back to their home and everybody was fine. But that was
Yeah.
probably the
Oh,
funniest or the
absolutely.
worst thing that happened to me. And I'm sure it's happened to everybody.
Oh, yeah. That's you sort of sometimes you rush around and you forget to do those things.
Yeah.
The amount of
Yeah.
times that I've had in the early days collecting swarms that I forgot to shut my suit. You just start collecting a swarm with your complete suit open at the front.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think we've all been there. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
you and your daughter started a business and you're selling honey. What made you get into Queens?
Well, I think given where we're located, and I'm about 2 hours southeast of Atlanta, Georgia, very rural area, and there's not a lot of opportunities or places to sell honey other than having people come here to our farm to buy and sell one or two jars at a time. And really, it was a friend of mine that said, the money in bees is really in selling nucleus hives. So I started, once I figured out how to keep bees, which I say took me about 5 years, then I began to understand how I could split the hives and sell other bees to other beekeepers. And that probably about 8, 10 years ago, that really became the focus of what I was doing. And it's proven to be a very good business, again, for where I'm located. There's a lot of beginning beekeepers in a 50-mile area of here, and it seems like people are always needing and wanting bees. It's where today we not only sell, the nucleus hives, we have a big demand for selling overwintered bees as well. So somebody that wants to buy literally a 10 frame hive versus a 5 frame hive, we're beginning to get more into that side of the business as well.
Okay, so established hives.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Mm. I just had Lawrence
yeah.
Edwards on the show, and he said that overwintered nukes was a really big thing in his business as well.
Yeah, again, I would say more than 50% of my business is working with beginning beekeepers, and packages are just one, we don't get them till late in the season here, and two, packages for a beginning beekeeper is just not the best way for them to go. So
Mm.
that's why we've gravitated more towards the nucleus hives or established hives. And so that leads into, what I quickly began to realize, everybody's wanting their bees first day of spring. My constraint was I didn't have enough queens to produce the nucleus hives that I was needing. So I pretty quickly figured out that I needed to learn how to raise my own queens. And that was probably 6 years ago. I went up to the University of Minnesota to Dr. Marla Spivak's class. She does a 3-day queen rearing class there at the university. And I learned her technique, which is pretty much, based on the Doolittle method. And that again was, 5 or 6 years ago. And since that time, having gone to more classes and listened to the other people, I think everybody just begins to tweak and choose and pick which system is going to work best for their operation. And that's pretty much what we have developed for here at our place.
Hmm. Okay. So what kind of queens are you using there? What lines?
So, I'm a queen producer. I'm not a queen breeder. So
Hmm.
I am pretty much using the stock that I'm using the stock that I have. Now, I have brought in some VSH queens and I've brought in some other artificially inseminated queens. I've brought in some Carnolian queens. My stock is primarily Italian because that's what we have mostly in this part of the country. But the hybrid of the Carnolian with the Italian works for me in this area. The Carnolians are a little bit slower building up and they overwinter in a smaller, cluster. The Italians, I mean, both breeds are gentle, but the Italians are just a little more robust. And again, for where I am, seem to do overall better consistently through the year. So again, I'm not specific on one breed, but I do kind of like playing around with mixing my Carnolians with my Italians.
Mm. And you find that that's the best type of mix for the hobbyist around your area.
Yeah, and I think the biggest reason is that, that the characteristics that I look at, and this is just a visual inspection, is, are they docile? Do they produce not only honey, but what kind of brood pattern are these queens putting out? And then what are their swarming characteristics? And then, how do they overwinter? Are they surviving through the winter? And we deal with a lot of diseases in this country and this area, especially. Varroa is wreaking havoc on all of us, and we still haven't figured it out. So, and there's a lot of things that we don't know what's killing our bees. So, I'm looking for survivorship as much as anything with when I'm choosing a hive to breed from.
Mm. Now I noticed that when I look at a lot of people's websites, a lot of people are starting to advertise survivor stock as a characteristic when selling their nucleus hives and their queens.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's pretty interesting. Mm,
Yeah, but that definition is pretty wide and varied too.
mm,
Survivorship, is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? I think a lot of people are hard pressed to say that they've got queens that are living beyond 4 to 5 years here. Again,
mm,
just with the environment and again the mites and the viruses that we have in our bees here.
mm. So when you got into raising your own queens, what type of cell raising method did you first start using, and what do you still use that now?
Yeah, so I experimented with a lot of different ones. I kind of tried and I'm probably going to say it differently, the NICOT or the NICOT method to start with. A friend of mine had all the equipment. I didn't have to buy it, so I
Mm,
got to experiment with that, but I really
yeah.
didn't have a lot of great success with that.
Mm,
Um, what I what I did was pretty much what I learned from Dr. Marla Spivak up at that class, and I started with the what we call the starter finisher method, where you have and I've tweaked her method in that I start with two deep boxes and a deeps. I think, is that terminology familiar with you?
mm-hmm.
The
Yes.
deep boxes are the
Yes.
deep frames, right?
Yep.
So the way if I can go through this, I'll try to explain it quickly. But my breeder, my brood queen or my breeder queen is in a separate hive. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but what I set up before I'm going to get ready for graft day is I have two deeps. One deep is queen right, and the other one is queenless. So I separate them with a queen excluder. And in that queenless deep, which is above, it is packed with nurse bees and it has no larvae because you don't want that hive to create queen cells. And then you separate those two deeps for 24 hours. You set them on their own stands. They're separate. Again, the queen right and the queenless. And then when I get ready for graft day, I will take the graft and put the graft frame into that queenless deep. I wait 24 hours and then I recombine the two hives. I set the queenless hive on top of the queen right hive, and I'm adding food and I'm adding more nurse bees if I need to. And what happens is the nurse bees come up and begin to feed those queen cells that you've grafted. And after, around day 11 is when I go in and remove the capped queen cells and move them either into mating nukes or into an incubator.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great method. It's pretty much the exact same method that I use. And
Oh, is it? Okay.
yes,
Interesting.
and today is actually the day in which I move some of my cells out of the cell finisher, and
Okay.
it's pouring with rain. So
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I
You
just thought,
gotta
oh,
you
that's
gotta
great.
still you got to live by the calendar. That's
Ah,
one thing too
yeah.
that people that aren't familiar with the queen, the queen rearing calendars really should look into either making their own or purchasing one because they are a very important tool to have early on as you begin to count days and the counting can easily get off if you're not on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you put them
Yeah,
into mating nukes, what type of mating nukes are you using?
yeah. Again, my I guess I call it a goal is to not get a lot of different equipment. I try to keep all my equipment pretty standard with either deeps or medium supers. So because I have 5 frame equipment, I will use a 5 frame nuke as a mating nuke.
Mm.
But sometimes I will take, I don't know if you're familiar with, certainly you have to be with internal feeders. An internal
Yep.
feeder oftentimes will take up 2 frames, so that
Yes.
5 frame nuke with an internal feeder becomes a 3 frame
Hmm.
mating nuke. The other thing that I do, and I am again very rural. Where I live is a heavily forested area with pine trees, and I have learned over the years that if I set those mating nukes out in the open, like in a pasture or something, I don't have as good success with the queens returning as I do if I set those mating nukes under a canopy of trees.
Oh, okay. That's good advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So and I can spread my mating nukes out. I mean, I can have because again we're on a farm. I can have my mating nukes spread out 20, 30, 40 feet apart. So there's no question about that queen getting back to the right box as long as none of the environmental things, the birds, the dragonflies, etc., get her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting because I've never actually tried to put my mating nukes out in the open before. I've always had them in amongst trees. So
Yeah,
that's a really, yeah,
yeah,
really good advice. And
yeah.
speaking about advice, what other types of advice would you give to someone who's wanting to produce locally mated queens just as a side business?
Yeah, so we talked about the method that I learned from Dr. Spivak. I think a great way for the first time beekeepers that want to understand and learn this method is I would really recommend, and again, there's a couple of different terms. People call it a Snellgrove board, they call it a double screen board, or they call it a cloak board. Now, I would recommend trying that method, and there's a lot of videos on YouTube that you can look at to get the details. But again, you separate your 2 boxes. You've got the lower box that's queen right, the box above it is queenless, and you stick that Snellgrove board or the double screen board in between the 2 hives. With that double screen, the bees cannot touch each other, so the top box thinks that it's queenless. As long as you pay attention and put some frames of eggs and nurse bees in that top frame or that top box, those those bees should develop, 3 to 6 to maybe 10 queen cells in a period of, a couple days that you can go back and begin to look to see if they have begun to develop a queen. If they haven't, you just take out the board and let the hive start over again and try it again in a couple weeks. But that has been a great way to start and get, 2 to 3 capped queen cells in a very easy method without having to worry about grafting.
Yeah, that's really good. And it's Bob Binney who's in your area, who's got that great video on the
That's
double screen board.
that's right. Yeah, that's a really easy way to do it. And the double screen board, you reverse the entrance, so the top box is going in a different direction into the entrance than the bottom super is. So to start out with, I would recommend that people maybe try that and begin to understand and count those days and go in and look at those cells just to see what the bees are doing to develop that queen cell, cap it off, etc.
That's great advice. Yeah, thanks a lot. And this year, Mary, what products are you offering this year as part of your business?
Yeah, so we have our nucleus hives, and then we have our overwintered hives, and then we have what we call our spring hives. So nucleus hives can be overwintered. That would be a queen from the previous year. A spring nucleus hive would be this year's queen, a 2024 queen. So it would be a relatively younger and newer hive compared to an overwintered hive. You know that the risk with having a hive from last year is, for us, there's a greater likelihood that they're going to swarm, and that can be a challenge to, again, your new beekeepers if they're not on top of it.
So for listeners out there who are looking to get into it around your area, you offer the overwintered hives. You've got the this year's hives that will be coming out, and you're also selling queens.
Also selling queens, that's right. Yeah.
Excellent.
And Brand, our success rate, I feel like it really is difficult. Our acceptance rate, or how many queens I raise versus how many I graft, I probably only have about a 30, 60 to 70% success rate.
Hmm.
And I think people just need to realize that, we're farmers, and not every seed that a farmer puts in the ground is going to germinate, and not every egg that you graft or every larvae that you graft is going to turn into a bred queen. And I think you just have to be accepting of that, and be realistic, and don't beat yourself up. You're not going to be 100%. I don't think anybody is when it comes to raising queens.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a bit of a don't count your chickens before they hatch type situation sometimes, isn't
Yeah,
it?
you're right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So where can we find you online, Mary?
Yeah, so thanks to my daughter, Catherine, we have a nice website. That's where she really helps me out a lot with the marketing and with the newsletter that we put out about every 6 to 8 weeks. But we're at BeeCo Apiaries. So it's BeeCo Apiaries.com.
Excellent.
And we're also on Facebook and Instagram at that same call letter.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot for being on the show today, Mary. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we finish up?
Well, again, have fun with this experiment. Use the resources that you have. Don't go out and buy a lot of things. Just figure out what's going to work with what you've got and the skills that you have, and take your time, because as someone told me long ago, beekeeping is not a race. It's just a journey, and you've got to learn and appreciate and understand each step along the way.
Oh, that's fantastic. Great advice to finish on. And thanks a lot for being on the show with us today, Mary.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Mary. Really nice episode, I thought. And she's working together with her daughter. It's a nice family business, and that might be just like you. You're, making some nucs, selling some honey, and you're thinking about doing some queens on the side just to supply people around your local area, then I think that episode would have been really great for you. Thanks again, Mary, for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Make sure you check out her Facebook page, her website, which I'll link in the show notes. And stay tuned, because next month I've got Corey Stevens on the show, and we're going to be talking about commercial operations, sending out queens for people to test and then send back. It's really, really interesting episode. So that's next month. And if that sounds interesting to you, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And just let everyone know, I really appreciate you listening to this podcast. I'm getting some nice emails about, how people are going with their own queen rearing. And if you're sort of in that journey at the moment and you'd like to send me an email and have a chat about it, feel free to. It's Brent at nixonqueenbees.com.au, which you'll see in the show notes. And until next time, thanks a lot, and I'll catch you on the next episode.